I'm going to move on to our second project now, which happens to be one of my favourites, and it's Assassin's Creed Syndicate. And I wondered if you could talk about that. Because obviously, a game like Journey, I don't know exactly what the average play length is. Is it 2 to 3 hours?
About 90 minutes to 2 hours or so.
Yeah.
It's basically meant to be like a film. The aspiration with Journey was that it would feel more like a poem, whereas most games you could think of more like a novel.
Yeah.
You pick them up, you come back to them, it takes you a week or a month or however long. Journey is, if you split Journey up, you're kind of like reading, if you read the first 7 lines of a sonnet, you've kind of blown it.
Yeah.
And so, the very concise play time.
So you go from that, and then all of a sudden you're on Assassins, which is hours. I mean, it's like 9-10 hours, and then there's all the DLC, and it's this huge.
Yeah, I would think 30-40 hours when all's said and done. I would imagine it could be long. It depends on how completionist you are. You know, I have to resist those games like a junkie because I'm the guy that like I remember when AC3 came out and they have these damn feathers up in the trees, and I'm like, I hate that. That's okay, I'll get it. Yeah. And so 40 hours later, I'm only in the second mission of the game or whatever because I'm like,
but you've got all the collectibles.
I can't resist that crap. So yes, wildly different beast.
Wildly different. I was going to ask about how did you get involved in that project? Was there a pitching process?
Yeah, that was one of those where I didn't know anyone involved in advance. Our mutual friend Lydia, the audio director, called my agent and said, we are looking for a composer for a new title. Of course, it's all shrouded in secrecy still at that time, and didn't even say what franchise or anything. But they said, Austin has a bit of a reputation for, coming at things from a slightly weird angle. And we want something very different for this game. And then subsequently, she and I had a really long phone call where they revealed this is the next Assassin's Creed, and they said, we're really proud at Ubisoft of this franchise, but we think it's kind of showing its age a little bit. It's been 10 years, and we want to invigorate it somehow, and we think music and audio can be one of the ways that we try to inject something new. So they said, would you mind putting together kind of a demo, a brief or pitch of some sort? And
Were you given, did they say it has to be X, Y, and Z? It has to, did they give you any notes?
Very basic guidelines. They said, we'd love to hear, they gave me a basic rundown on who the characters were, this twin sibling assassins, and how the game is kind of a relationship with their father. Yeah. Their father who was gone. The game has this subtext of them trying to live up to legacy. And so, which I also found immediately compelling because it was unlike most of the Assassin's Creed games. It wasn't about some Joe Nobody becoming an assassin. It was two people that they've been in this lifestyle forever, and you're stepping into the characters who are these veterans basically already, even though they're quite young. Mm-hmm. And so that made a big difference, knowing that information in my pitch, because I said there should be a cockiness to the music. It should have a almost sarcastic quality. These are two young, arrogant, very skilled assassins where 99% of their foes have no chance of surviving. And they know that, and they're super arrogant about it. And so I said the music should take complete ownership over that, and it should not feel like danger. In fact, what if it's like this kind of macabre dance of death, like a waltz? And Lydia lit up and was like, go on. And of course, I was sure that the phone was going to hang up because I was starting to go down a rabbit hole that was so off the path of the other AC games. But she said, they gave no musical references. They just said, here, it's Victorian London. It's the usual kind of AC, Assassins versus Templars, end of the world, all kinds of like aliens or whatever the hell. It's an oddly sci-fi franchise beyond its poster art, and so they walked me through that, and I'd played all of them up to that point anyway, and they said, so now just hit us with anything that comes to mind. They said, we will give you no creative direction, and the more you push it, the better. And again, I thought, well, I'm going to take you at your word, and then I will not get hired. And I was shocked when they called back and said, can you start? I mean, they practically called back the next day and said, can you start tomorrow? I mean, she tripped all over herself to make it happen. And
any of the ideas that you used in your pitch, did they make it through into the final game?
The theme is verbatim, note for note. I didn't. In fact, I didn't rewrite a single cue in the whole project after the first cue. It was insane. I don't know how that happens. It's so
amazing.
It's really rare. But Lydia and I just got into this this synchronicity. And the music supervisor is this amazing French Canadian musician and programmer named Christian. He was incredibly brilliant, and he and I worked together on the Wise implementation very, very closely. And I went to them and said, you know, I've played all the previous games, and I have a laundry list of things that annoy me about the way the music is implemented. Yeah. Again, I thought that might be very impolite, and they were like, please tell us. And because I said, you know, it drives me nuts that I can whip out my hidden blade and take someone down in 2 seconds, and yet it triggers this dramatic, epic action music. That sucks. And they said, you're right. And I said, so how about, you know, we develop an algorithm where below certain levels of difficulty, music cannot trigger, and we go with a less is more approach. And they loved that. So we worked really closely to constantly play test the game to see, you know, is the music responding too quickly? And because then it has to stop on a dime a lot of the times and that kind of thing. And so, yeah, it was really, really easy, surprisingly, even though it was gut-wrenching, and I also went through a lot of hell personally in my life during that project. It was shockingly fluid the whole time.
Because on a game like Journey, obviously you can play it enough times that you know exactly when things are going and you can really fine-tune it. But on a game like Assassins, it's so big. What did you have a huge delivery list of lots of different things, or did you take more of a this is a suite?
I've done it both ways. I am more of a fan, instead of relying on music editorial process, I really like cues to be designed for exactly what they're written for. And if we need more, we need more. And so when all was said and done, I wrote about 3.5 hours worth on Syndicate, and which was pretty on par with what we targeted. We had originally aimed for about 3 hours, and so only went over a little bit. I think it works pretty well. I mean, of course, a game like that there's always more you can add. I mean, there's a few cues that play enough times that I'm like, I hate it so much. And, you know, I'd rather just mute it at this point. Like that one cue, you know, I'm always like emailing them. I don't suppose, you know, in the next update we can, and they're like, leave us alone. The game is done. It's like Origins just came out and I'm sitting here going like, oh, I have more notes on Syndicate. But yeah, no, it was a huge list of, you know, combat music, mission-specific music, and then catch-all. You know, there's a lot of not DLCs, but side mission content that has its own music, and then others with that group where there's not specific music for this kind of mission, but there's sort of a group of missions that fit under a certain umbrella, and we score them collectively and that kind of thing. And
on the actual soundtrack album, there are a group of tracks that are probably my favourite on the album, that are actually used as diegetic music in the game, and it's
ballads.
the Murder Ballad.
Yeah, that's a Lydia thing again.
I love them, and me and the kids sing them in the car.
Oh my God, your poor children.
Give me the cure. Oh, they're indoctrinated now.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. I love that.
So tell us a bit about the Murder
For
Ballads.
reference, and for you're not familiar, I love your children singing "Give Me the Cure," a song about someone begging for death because of poison from a mental asylum.
They don't know. They've just got happy faces. Give me the cure.
Yes. Throw them into the Thames so their nightmares end. Those are some of the lyrics of that one. That's great. Well, I like your family more and more. So the story with that was, I mean, this was one of those things that was partially reactionary. The sea shanties in Black Flag had proven to be an unexpectedly popular element of the game, finding them and triggering them when you're out on your ship. And they had put a lot of energy into recording all like this Canadian college glee club singing drunken pirate like. And like all Assassin's Creed games, there was going to be a huge amount of source music anyway. And Lydia said, being from London, or at least I'm pretty sure from London, particularly, not just England, but from the area. I mean, she said, you know, there's certain folk traditions and things that have been going for hundreds of years, and there's certain kinds of pubs where you hear certain kinds of songs. And she was really hell-bent on bringing authenticity to that, where 1860s London was represented well through its street performers and buskers and that kind of thing. And so they were already investing well over an hour of additional music just into all of that. And she would send me huge lists of their vetted folk songs and say, you know, can we incorporate these into the score? What do you think of this list, that, and the rest? And then about halfway through the project, she said, I have a challenge for you. She said, how are you as a songwriter? And he's like, well, I've done it a few times, and what do you got? You know, what do you got cooking? And she said, well, there's this genre called the murder ballad. It's a real genre of these kind of macabre, it's like the Brothers Grimm genre of songs. And the idea is, what if there's original songs in the game, but they're masquerading as period source songs where some anonymous composer living in Victorian London is kind of keeps noticing these figures running along the roof, gradually changing the political power of London through these targeted assassinations, where she said, what if there's songs that are about what you're doing, but from this vantage point of not really knowing much about it, where there's an ignorance to like who you are, why you're doing what you're doing, but just someone who's noteworthily awful has just died. Like in the case of Give Me the Cure, you know, the doctor running this hospital that's actually experimenting on its patients, you know, therefore you have to target as one of your missions. Well, it's like you complete that mission, and then as you wander through certain areas, you'll hear a song reflecting what you just did. And so it was the only time it's ever been in my career where my deliverable was sheet music, because they were hiring separate musicians to record all these different versions, and like different male voices, different female versions, fast, slow, very drunkenly versus very kind of properly. And it was hilarious. And I had just finished one of the most amazing things I'd ever worked on in my entire life, which is an evening-length theater piece called This Gaming Life, with this incredible trio of songwriters from Australia called Tripod. And I said, I'd love to do this, but I want to work with these three guys. Can you hire them to co-write it with me? Because if nothing else, they are the best lyricists I have ever met by far. But they're also quite brilliant songwriters. Yeah. And so I just sent a couple of the things that we had done, and Ubisoft said, great, pulled the trigger. And the four of us wrote those 6 songs, and it was definitely one of the most fun times I've ever had in my career.